taking the piss out of stuff it's kind of our love language.
You're still listening. This is our final transmission.
We're here, Jamie. How's it going?
It's going well. Welcome to another edition of We Don't Really Like Ewan McGregor, but we covered one of his films anyway.
Whoa, you're joining me?
Well, we'll see, won't we?
I assumed you were a McGregor head.
I don't care for Ewan McGregor. I think he's one of those guys that is just in films but can't really act. He's always the same guy.
Yeah, I would read the Ewan McGregor story just to find out how he got... No, I fucking wouldn't. I don't care. Welcome to Final Transmission, a horror podcast where Jamie and I dig deep into a horror movie, mostly of Jamie's choice, once per week. How you doing? Welcome. Sit down. Get comfy.
We're in uncharted territories here, Sam, because I had not seen Dr. Sleep before.
Holy shit, I assumed you had.
I thought I had, but I put it on and I didn't remember a single thing. I had some vague memories of the Jacob Tremblay baseball boy scene. We're not going to get into spoilers until after the first break, but I remembered that bit, but I didn't remember anything before it or after it or anything. So this was a first watch for me, Sam.
Wow. I think this might have been my third watch because I saw it in the cinema and then I watched the director's cut when it came out, and then I watched the director's cut again for this.
Wowzers. So you're a Dr. Sleephead.
Nope. It's a lot of times to watch a movie. It's 9 hours of a movie that you got a lot to say about. So, I mean, you know, to lay a little bit of context, I'm a huge Stephen King fan. You're a very big Stephen King fan, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're a bigger Stephen King fan than me.
Right. I'm a nut.
You're a nut. I'm a tiny
Fruit.
acorn.
Yeah. Fruit, nut, acorn, and, thus is the hierarchy of King fans. So, big fan of the books. Obviously, I've seen nearly all of the movie adaptations, I would say. Not all of them. I bet you've probably seen more movie adaptations than me.
I went through a period of just watching Stephen King adaptations to varying degrees of success, obviously, because some of them are very different to the books and are good.
Yeah.
Some of them are very different to the books and are bad.
Yeah.
Some of them are very close to the books, and that is also sometimes quite bad. So
I think what we can agree on is that most of them are bad.
yeah.
For different reasons.
Yeah, I haven't read Dr. Sleep, so I will be deferring to you. I've got a million questions I want to ask you about how the book works. So I guess we want to issue a spoiler warning for the movie and the book.
Mm-hmm. We're going to be spoiling both.
And I don't care that it gets spoiled because I'm not going to read a Stephen King book that came out after 1998, I think.
Mate, let me save you the trouble. It's not worth reading.
I know
if
that.
you've seen the movie, it's just not worth reading the book unless you're obsessed.
Yeah. I can't imagine reading a modern Stephen King book, like any of them.
Full stop.
Yeah.
Okay, again, let me save you the pain. Don't. There's several, and I can help you out with all of them.
I read Under the Dome, hated it.
Oh, I love Under the Dome.
I finished reading the Gunslinger books and was so mad, so angry.
They're the only ones I haven't read, the Dark Tower series, the Gunslinger and all that bullshit. I read enough about it to know that it wasn't for me. It's a separate part of the catalogue as far as I'm concerned, so I don't go near that. But
yeah, I hear Mike Flanagan is making an adaptation, a true to the book adaptation of, which I assume means, spoiler alert, that he's going to have to cast Stephen King in the main role. Isn't that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I've read enough about them to not need to read them. And I feel like you're probably going to be in a very similar spot with The Shining. With Dr. Sleep and The Shining, probably. Have you read The Shining?
I have read The Shining. I've got my copy
Okay,
right
cool.
here. I was leafing through it just before this, just to...
Oh, you've got an excellent edition there. That's one of the Brit editions, right? They're the ones I used to use in school. I've got both my bad editions of The Shining and Dr. Sleep next to me for quick thumbing, as they say. So, where do you want to start with this, and how much Stephen King baggage do you want me to bring to this bullshit?
Bring it all. Pile it on.
Okay.
Lay it on
Okay.
me.
I'll put it in the elevator of the Overlook Hotel with the help of a very well-dressed bellboy, and we can get started.
Yeah, spill it out on the 4th floor.
Yep, absolutely.
I guess we'll also issue a spoiler warning for The Shining.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we're going to spoil the whole lot. I mean, we'll spoil a ton of Stephen King stuff in this. So
Yeah.
if you've never heard of Stephen King, maybe pop down to your local library and come back in 9 years.
Yeah. I'd start with Goosebumps, then work your way up to Point Horror, and then go for Stephen King.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll see you in your 40s.
When you're just about ready to tackle Dr. Sleep, the
Yeah.
book and movie combo. I can't believe this movie was 2019. It feels like it came out 1,000 years ago.
Well, so this is our most recent movie, and I don't know what possessed me to pick it. I figured that we would have a lot of things to say about it,
Yeah.
regardless of whether we like it or not. Spoiler alert, I quite like it.
Me too.
It feels the most like a Stephen King adaptation of any of the Stephen King adaptations I've ever watched.
For my money, and please correct me in the comments if you think I'm completely wrong, I think it's one of the closest adaptations, book to movie. I wouldn't go as far as to say faithful. It's immensely complicated, obviously, because we've got a movie sequel to a movie that deviated from the original book so much that Stephen King completely washed his hands of the project and hates the Kubrick movie of The Shining, as we all know. So
Yeah.
we're in strange territory, but there's obviously like a huge effort in the making of this movie to remain loyal to at least the spirit of the original text and the world in which it lives.
Yeah. All right. So let me drop a synopsis and then we'll take a break and we'll come back and we'll start spoiling it.
Great. Let's spoil the fuck out of this.
Okay. So the year is 2019. Danny Torrance, the kid from The Shining, is all grown up. And you can't say all grown up without saying all grown up.
It's a great Swingers reference. Well played.
Yeah. I can't do it. I can't say that without saying that.
He's all grown up.
Our little Danny is all grown up. He has been medicating his shine with alcohol for basically his entire adult life. He is haunted by the ghosts of the Overlook Hotel. And one day he gets a shiny message from a young girl called Abra, who also has the shine. But someone's coming for her. A group of someone's are coming for her to eat her shine because that's what they like to do, although it's not really established why or how or anything. And so they face off with what they call the True Knot.
The True Knot.
They call them the Knot in the film once, an hour in, and I was like, what's the Knot? You've never mentioned this before. You never mention it again. Okay. But they call themselves the Knot. Everything heads back towards the Overlook Hotel, which is miraculously still standing. And the third act ensues from there.
That's a great synopsis. And how struck are you by how fucking ridiculous it all sounds when you say it out loud?
I mean, it's ridiculous when you watch it. I think that's why it feels like it's the most Stephen King, because obviously Stephen King can't write a 200-page novel, especially not in 2013 when he wrote Dr. Sleep. So like everything is so meandering, and it's all about developing. I mean, I haven't read the book, but I assume it's all about developing a mood and an atmosphere. So like you're just going all over the place. You're taking a real journey with these characters, and so it's all nonsense. It's all very Stephen King.
Yeah, the nonsense levels. Again, maybe this is a spoiler, but this is some nonsensical, farcical mayhem, both book and movie. When you strip it down to its core components and speak aloud the plot and the core elements, it's dumb as a shoe. And therein lies a lot of the charm, but also therein lies all of its fatal flaws, in my opinion. So a lot of meat on these bones. We're going to take a cleaver to the lot.
We are, and we're going to do that right after this little break.
Quick snooze, back in 2.
Will you give it up, man? Nobody's out there. We're alone. Oh no, there's somebody out there. I'm picking up all this crosstalk.
Sam, what record labels are you plumping at the moment?
Just Fat Wreck. No, wait. Just mostly Red Scare Industries. I mean, you want to talk about a label that launched the career of the Menzingers. You are welcome, people. Chicago's premier purveyors of punk rock, power pop, party, pinata music. get your lips around some redscare.net is my advice. What about you, Jamie?
I have the same advice. I think that is good advice. You should go to that website, buy yourself a record or a t-shirt, a koozie, like, I don't know, do what you need to do, but like, just go there and buy the things.
Do what you need to do, but get it done. Redscare.net. Jamie.
Yes, Sam.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. Can I start off by saying that I think Rose the Hat is the most Stephen King antagonist. It's just a woman in a hat that eats people's souls. It just feels like Stephen King was like, what's the most me thing that could possibly ever exist in literary or cinematic world? And it's a pretty lady in a hat that kills children.
You raised such a strong point in that scathing critique. A lot of what happens in this movie, and especially in the book, feels like, well, it doesn't just feel like, I think it's deliberately an element of self-parody, and it's the first time in King novels, as far as I'm concerned, that we get this like tidal wave of self-awareness where there's all kinds of stuff happening in the book where he has to kind of throw his hands up narratively and be like, so that just happened. Like really, really fucking phoning it in on the coincidences and the paths crossing and stuff like that, and giving no real kind of expository explanation for why things are happening. Just kind of, well, then he walked in and that was it. There he was, like ridiculous levels. And I like that level of freedom, that he's obviously earned throughout his career as being the most prolific and most widely well-known and respected horror writer of all time. I love that. But it also opens so many doors to so much tomfuckery that we end up with this real mishmash of a movie. And again, this is a movie I actually kind of like. So let's not just completely strip it to bits. Let's talk a little bit about what we liked. Obviously, your first watch, you must have walked away with some kind of overall impression of the movie. What kind of feelings did you have?
I mean, I liked it a lot. I think the Jacob Tremblay baseball boy death scene is one of the most horrible and violent death scenes I've ever seen in a movie.
It's fantastic, right?
Yeah, he really fucking sells that for that one scene that he's in.
I love that it went there. I really expected them to either cut that completely or just have it be a fucking clipping in a newspaper or something. But that was graphic. I really, really like that.
Yeah, is that just as graphic in the novel?
Yeah, possibly even more so because of the nature of the True Knot themselves in the novel is very different to the movie. So just, I'm not going to give you too much here, but in the novel, there's more of them. And the core of their, I guess, like intended menace is that they travel in these RVs, and that gives them a level of kind of anonymity from mainstream society. And they own a lot of these RV campsites that they stay at because they're really rich. And they are mostly, almost entirely, very old people. And they're all wearing like polyester leisure suits and like fucking, they'll wear like a trilby and a tracksuit. And they're all just creepy, weird old people who constantly fuck each other. They have orgies all the time. They eat disgusting food. They're portrayed as being really kind of greasy, kind of slimy, disgusting people. And
I mean, that sounds kind of more interesting than what we get in the movie.
Yeah, I'm very torn because obviously it's a Hollywood movie. These people are all fucking very attractive and very. There's a lot of gravity and magnetism to the characters in the movie, and in the book, it's just not the case. They're just kind of gristly, old, weird creeps, and they have awful names, and their behavior is totally like forced, and everything they do is pretty lame. So I like a bit of both. The menace doesn't quite fully hit the mark in the book because they're never a real threat to the reader, in my opinion. Like, we're scared for the other characters a little bit, but you kind of get the impression from the very start that they're dying and they're not going to win. So there's no real threat. Whereas in the movie,
I got that in the movie as well, to be fair, because obviously they're only ever going to kill people who have the shine, apart from Snakebite Andy.
Yeah.
And in that one scene. And then like after you see Carol Struycken die, it's like, oh, these people are really fairly mortal for what was been presented to us as like these immortal soul vampires. So
they're
like,
very killable, yeah.
Yeah, so and then when you get to that one scene where they literally all die apart from Rose the Hat, then like it all seems very simple from there. I think that's my main criticism of the film, is that we never really get a sense of the the actual menace beyond that one scene with the baseball boy of how terrifying these people actually could be. And I think making them sweatier and older and greasier would maybe help sell that a little bit.
Yeah, it's tricky in the book because you don't really know how to feel. Like Stephen King classically obviously has like a huge problem with really old people, people on a certain end of the political spectrum, fat people. Like he has so much judgment and so much loaded commentary in his writing that you feel sometimes he's kind of just venting about old people in RVs in the book, and it just kind of detracts a little bit from the fear factor. They do feel gross, and it is quite disgusting to read about them fucking all the time and the way they eat and just the way they behave with each other and the words they use. I'm really disappointed in the movie that we didn't get the character Bent Dick who's in the book. There's so many bad names. It's like Steamboat Jimmy and all these fucking stupid names. And so much of the book is like totally skippable, which I didn't feel with the movie, which is interesting because for a 3-hour movie, I expected to be bored to tears.
Yeah.
So I actually quite enjoyed the way the movie kept things at a steady simmer. I'm always surprised when I finish this movie that I don't feel like I've watched a 3-hour movie at all. I feel pretty much constantly entertained and fairly intrigued.
Yeah, it does like fly by at a pretty decent clip, doesn't it?
The things that serve the movie well, I think, are the moments where tension is building, characters are deepening, and setup play is being put before us. Whereas the big action sequences, they're fine, but they're so Hollywood. There's so many one-liners and so much like, you forgot to buckle up, or whatever the fuck, all this like nonsensical Hollywood trash.
There was one line in it that really, really annoyed me. So after Billy Freeman is talking about how he gave up hunting because that buck died or whatever, and he smelled it.
Because it stank, yeah.
There's a line after that where Dan Torrance is like, you still got those buck rifles? When, like, why wouldn't you just say you still got that hunting stuff? Like,
yeah.
Are they special buck rifles? Is that a thing? I have
No, I mean, yeah, they're hunting rifles. You don't need any of that setup. You could have just had him say, let's get your guns. Like,
yeah. We're in America. We know that everybody's got a gun. Like,
yeah, exactly. There is a lot of that, a lot of like really ham-fisted scene setting and stuff where you feel like breadcrumbs are being laid for an exciting payoff, and it's just a nothing dead end or a stupid fucking, I don't know, kingism.
That scene where all of the not die,
yeah,
it's just too quick.
It's
too
not
quick
fight,
and too easy. It's like they're just being shot. If these guys could just be shot, then how have they lived for thousands of years?
Yeah. I mean, and again, like on paper, the idea of these ancient, semi-ethereal traveling soul vampires is kind of cool. Like I love
absolutely
the
cool.
tiny glimpse into their past we get where they talk about them riding camels in the desert and, like going back to like almost, it sounds like the dawn of Christendom. These people have roved the land looking for people with powers, etc. But that's the only glimpse we get. And given that movies have the power to literally show you anything, I would have loved to have seen Grandpa Flick on the fucking battlefields at the Somme or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, it would have been amazing.
But if that happened, he would just get shot and then he would be dead.
And he would die. Yeah, exactly. So they've kind of stayed on the edges, it sounds like, and they've been these kind of creepy, gross, transient people. And that's another thing I don't like is part of the menace is supposed to be that they're incredibly rich and well-connected. That's not really scary. Like, it's
scary in the real world.
Device. Yeah. Yeah, right. But that's the thing. It's too scary in the real world, and it's not scary enough in this movie because they don't flex it at all.
There's a line of dialogue where I don't know, Danny Torrance is like, "Oh, they're really rich and well connected," but like we never see that. There's no evidence of that. She's just got a tatty old hat and a fridge full of flasks. Like
they look like hipsters.
Yeah, it's just like just a bunch of people.
Yeah, they're like van life hipsters in this movie, which again makes no sense. Like. That's the only part of the true knot really that kind of collapses for me in the transition from book to movie is in the book. At least you understand why they're all RV people. They've got limited mobility, and a lot of them are like being fed by other people, and they're very old and they're sort of struggling to make their lifestyle work. Whereas in the book, there's no real reason for them to be living in these RVs and looking the way they look and behaving the way they behave, apart from choice. And that just presents a really difficult character to marry with the action of the movie. So slightly strange. I understand they just had to cast young, hot people. I get that. You couldn't have a movie where the antagonists are just all old people. It just wouldn't fucking sell. So sure.
Yeah. I mean, I quite like Rebecca Ferguson as Rose the Hat. I think
So do I.
I think she's really good. I don't know what the character's like in the book. If it's quite similar but younger.
Yeah, it is actually fairly similar. She just does a great job of portraying a real fucking rough hang of a character, in my opinion. Rose the Hat sucks, and she really, really kills it in terms of making her at least watchable. You know, she's almost unreadable in the book. So,
I wanted to ask you about the logistics of the soul sucking.
Yeah.
So in the film, we see them like eat this Violet girl at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And then 30 years later, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
when they turn Snakebite Andy,
Yeah.
they're still chomping down on Violet's shine.
Yeah.
Like, do they only feed once every 30 years? I mean, that's a pretty Stephen King thing anyway, isn't it? But like, I don't understand the logistics of that. They just, yeah.
I feel like that's a terrible oversight. I think that's maybe a whoopsie. It doesn't make any sense, does it, chronologically? I think the only thing I can think of is maybe they save her specifically. Like they saved a little bit of her for a long time.
Because the shine is so tasty.
Yeah, real tasty shine. I actually really like the scene where they feed on that girl, Violet. I think that's quite a well-constructed scene, and it builds the menace early.
Yeah.
You get them sort of emerging from the woods. They appear hungry like wolves. I think that stuff's really cool. But
yeah, they do that thing where
doesn't make any sense.
The sort of the wolf thing where there's one and then there's several, which is how I picture wolves, but it's not necessarily accurate to real life. But it's how I sort of picture it.
Well, it's a real pack hunting kind of vibe that they give you.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess the main problem, the difference in the book is Snakebite Andy's in her 30s in the book. And you get a lot of background with her, which is fantastic. A lot of it is quite well implied in the movie, I think. But she was horribly abused as a child and busts out, runs away and spends her life luring men into cinemas in the daytime and putting them to sleep. She doesn't have this push ability that she has in the movie. She can just make people sleep. And she's a cool character in the book. I like her a lot. But the whole Steam thing is the fact that they're calling it Steam. We have to address. Can we not do any better than Steam?
Well, I think
Shine. Just call it Shine. Like,
yeah, but Shine is only called Shine because that's what Halloran calls it, right?
Oh, true. Yeah, it's a Halloranism. Yeah, good point. True.
The guy that they get to play Halloran, he's pretty good.
But fucking, I have a major problem with recasting characters from the original movie. It's just so jarring to see someone trying to be Jack Torrance, like trying to be fucking.
Especially when it's fucking the kid from E.T. Like,
it's a real tricky. It just sucks you out of the scene completely, and before you know it, you've been focusing on all the wrong shit, and you've missed the resonance of the moment. Like, it's hard. It's hard work.
Like, I don't know if what they were doing there. I mean, they definitely just wanted him to be Jack Torrance, but like, I was looking at it like, is he meant to be? He's meant to look like Jack Torrance and act like Jack Torrance, but he's meant to have a different face. And I'm like, is it meant to be a different guy, but we're meant to think it's him? And then, nonsense.
Yeah, you're doing it a real favor and reading into it way more than I think. I think they were just so there's a sharp point in the movie where leading up to this, I was desperate to see Danny go back to the Overlook. Do you know what I mean? Because I knew that would happen. The hotel's still there at the end of the movie. It blows up in the book.
Yeah.
So surely he's going back, and it's going to be amazing. And all the trailers were, it's mostly stuff at the Overlook. I think from the moment they go back to the Overlook in the movie is some of the worst stuff in the whole film.
I agree, and not just because it's kind of boring and it all happens quite quickly.
Yeah.
But because you've got all this Kubrick baggage of how amazing it looked and how wonderful it was, and all you've got is somebody recreating it. And what it really reminded me of, have you seen Ready Player One?
Yeah.
So there's that bit in Ready Player One when they go to the Overlook.
Yeah.
And that is amazing because it's fucking Spielberg doing it.
Yeah.
And like, Spielberg has the capacity and the ability to channel Kubrick, whereas Mike Flanagan is a great director, and some of the early stuff I was like, wow, this is like quite Kubrickian in its approach, and it's holding up really well. But when we're in the Overlook, it's like we're just copying badly.
Yeah, it felt like a Disney ride. It felt like you'd gone to like one of these Overlook experiences or something, which is horrible, really. Like, we're giving this movie a lot of rope. We're slagging it off big time, but that should be unforgivable. But somehow it's not. So here's why I think it's not. The stuff with Danny Torrance, played by Ewan McGregor, I think.
Ewan McGregor.
Yeah, Ewan McGregor, I think is actually pretty superb. It both in the book and in the movie. It's gritty, it's earthy, there's a journey, there's a battle. It's one man's struggle against all of his demons.
Yeah.
The flashbacks are fine, but the stuff in the present with Danny, bottoming out, trying to get sober, bumming around, living his life, stuff of dreams. Like when I imagine where Danny Torrance the child would be as an adult before this book came out, I didn't even for a second think that he would just be his dad but homeless. It's fantastic.
Yeah, no, I really rated that. There was a few things that the movie sort of breezes by really quickly, like because we know that he has the shine.
Yeah.
When he sees the dead woman that he banged and the dead baby, like we know that that's real.
Yeah.
And not just a representation of the guilt of just leaving them. So like, why is that not explored some more? Like he should be feeling fucking horrible about that.
Yeah, and
forever.
in the book he is. Yeah,
Yeah, I can imagine
right
that.
to the very end. It's one of the big sort of reconciliations he has to make is his action there in leaving. There's some really shitty like King stuff in that scene where he leaves the mum and the baby. The baby like crawls towards the table with the Coke on it and goes, "Candy." He has to move the Coke out of the way before he puts the kid in the bed. But because Stephen King's writing from a place of being an addict, it all feels very, very real and really quite painful and jarring. And I thought that was one of the scariest scenes, was him Danny waking up in the bed with the mum and the dead mum and the dead baby talking to him and saying, they haven't found us yet. I thought that was really chilling.
Yeah, I agree, but I wish that didn't just happen and then, oh, now we're sober. It's 9 years later or whatever.
I'm over it.
Yeah, it seemed like a very quick. Maybe that's meant to be the inciting thing that makes him get sober. But
I think it's his rock bottom. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But again, they don't tell us that. They don't show us that.
No.
And Ewan McGregor isn't a good enough actor to convey that in the scene. So
yeah.
Oh,
But
that's really harsh. I'm sorry. I'm trying not to go hard on Ewan.
I agree. I do think he's quite good in this, more like generally.
I'd go as far as to say this is his best filmic performance.
Yeah, I mean, probably Trainspotting, but maybe his last cinematic jobbo for 25 years, 30 years or whatever.
Yeah, I think about Trainspotting is it's a great movie, and I think that elevates him and his performance and the people around him and everything that happens in that movie is pretty great. Whereas this, it feels like if he was garbage in this, or if somebody in his shoes was garbage in this, a lot of the movie would fall apart.
Yeah.
So I think that he brings a lot of strength to this, even though his accent work is still unforgivably bad for a man in his 40s. Yeah, I do think he kind of holds it together.
So in the book, what happens at the end? This is like big spoiler territory, but obviously the Overlook doesn't exist anymore. So how does the book climax without an Overlook hotel?
Climax. The very ending itself is kind of a classic King happy ending.
Right.
But they do go back to the site of the Overlook because it's where the True Knot have a campground on the grounds of where the Overlook Hotel once was. So it's almost like their fucking flagship location is the ground there. It's obviously profound sight in these movies and the books. So you do get a showdown confrontation there. It obviously doesn't end the same way as in the movie. But you also get this kind of like everyone kind of walks away alive and happy at the end of the book, having reconciled a lot of stuff and closing a huge chapter in the King universe. Whereas the movie has a darker, grittier, more kind of explosive ending.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because obviously Halloran dies in The Shining and he doesn't die in the book.
Yep.
And then Ewan McGregor, big spoiler, I mean, you can probably guess what the spoiler is at this point, but dies in the movie, but doesn't die in the book. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, doesn't die in the book. Halloran
but
dies.
I guess we're meant to like equate Danny's journey with Halloran's journey, aren't we? So I guess it makes sense that he would die when Halloran died, but like.
Yeah, I think so. There's a confusing relationship there because Halloran is his mentor in a lot of ways, and in terms of like archetypes, he's his wise old man, and he survives the first book, but dies in the second book, completely kind of, I don't know what the best word for it is, like off screen almost. And then he does come back to visit Dany as a ghost later in the book, but it's quite fleeting and it's not made a big deal out of. So Halloran's a really interesting character across all 4 properties, books and movies. And, there's no better Halloran, in my opinion, than Scatman Crothers in the original movie. You can't help but read him as Scatman in both the books, in my opinion.
My uncle Scatman.
Yeah. Imagine if he was your fucking uncle.
I mean, it's spelled different, but I've always liked to think that.
It's a pretty good chat up line for you.
Yeah.
See the resemblance? Yeah. Again, another tricky relationship to reconcile. I love Dany being completely alone, to be honest. I like him as a real lost soul. So
yeah.
The biggest problem I have with the book bleeds into the biggest problem I have with the book is what makes the movie possible, really, is Stephen King writing a young adult fiction adventure book, tying it to The Shining, and bringing in all his hatred of old people in RVs. That's the central premise.
Yeah.
So when you turn that into a movie, you get all the gritty down and out Danny Torrance stuff that I think is fantastic and really works and deepens the character and deepens the lore.
Yeah, I just wish there was more of it.
Me too. I wish it was at least half the movie should be that, right?
Yeah.
So you get this real Phoenix from the ashes shit of Danny, sobering up and becoming, his destiny almost. The Abra Stone stuff, just put it in the bin, basically. Like, I'm just so over it. Like, superhero, flawless child stuff. Nah.
Yeah. I quite like it because I think that, like, Dany has the very powerful shine in The Shining.
Yeah.
So Abra also. But, I mean, I guess she gets to grips with it pretty fucking quickly. Obviously, it's been a while since I read The Shining.
Yeah.
But, like, I always thought Tony was, particularly when I was watching this, when she's having the conversation with Dan through the blackboard, I thought that Tony was just some guy elsewhere that Dany is communicating with through Shine.
Yeah.
Similar to how Abra is communicating with Dan. But that's not the case. He just thinks his Shine is called Tony.
Yeah, this was a huge problem. I think a really tricky one to navigate for a writer-director, because in the book, I think it's pretty heavily implied that Tony is Danny Torrance from the future coming back through the Shine to warn Dany about, I don't know, the Overlook, ghosts, goblins, who knows. But in the movie,
living
Tony is
plants.
the little boy who lives in his mouth. So in the sequel to the movie, Dany dismisses Tony completely as his imaginary friend because he couldn't understand his own Shine. And it's done so glibly. And just like every like true Shining book fan in the cinema must have just been like ripping the armrests off their seats when that happened, because it's so huge. Like, he can time travel with his Shine in the book, and it's just some dumb kid thing in the movie.
That sort of sells Abra's power more. If Dany can do all this stuff, he can time travel, he can like go into people's brains and do all this stuff and, communicate with the younger version of himself.
Yeah.
That sells the insane powers that Abra has.
Yeah, for sure.
So it seems daft to miss that.
Yeah, she has the power to cause fucking earthquakes with her mind.
Yeah.
I think in the book she's shining from a very young age. She's doing some cool kind of creepy stuff. It feels almost Carrie-esque.
They do show that with the spoons thing.
And the piano, yeah. But she's a fucking baby in the crib in the book, I think, doing stuff. The parents are more significant in the book. Really good performances from both parents, I thought, in the movie. Some difficult stuff to pull off, I think.
I think the dad really sold, firstly, the guy in his 40s hanging around with a 13-year-old girl thing, which I was like, come on now, this we need to address this, and they do, which is nice.
Yeah, it was great.
And then the sort of twitchy pouring a whiskey stuff.
Yeah.
It's a really easy way to convey a lot of stuff in like one quick moment. And I thought that scene was just really nice. Like, oh, we're all fucked up here. Do you also want some whiskey? No, thank you. We're in recovery. Like,
yeah. See, all of that worked for me, and it's. I think that's the movie at its full strength. Is it takes a 500-page book and turns it into a 3-hour movie, which normally I would be struggling with, but it does so pretty deftly. Like, this is material handled really, really well, considering the outcome is a little bit mixed. You know, in previous King movies where you're trying to cram in 2 years of things happening in 5 minutes on screen, you're really, really struggling. But that one scene, you're right, is a great example of characterization, skipping a bunch of time and bullshit and 50 pages of awkward dialogue and just getting it done. Yeah. And that's where the movie serves the book really well and serves the audience really well. And it does that continually. I think I've got to give full marks to every person acting in this movie, really. Nobody massively lets the side down. There's no huge clunker, in my opinion. Do you think the performances were pretty roundly decent?
Yeah, no, I think so. There's nobody that I was like, oh, fucking hell, you. I mean, there's a bunch of people that are just in it because they're Mike Flanagan's little gang. They're Mike Flanagan repertory players or whatever.
Like Flanagans.
Yeah, like Barry the Chunk, who doesn't really do or say anything in the movie.
Yeah.
But looks to me how I've always pictured Delbert Grady. So is sort of throwing me off because he looks like Delbert Grady looks in my head.
Do you think so?
Yeah, like look at that guy and tell me he's not Delbert Grady.
I can't see him as anyone except the guy that ruined Halloween Kills.
Yeah.
Oh God, this guy blows. Do you like him? I find him really hard to watch.
I don't like him, but he's always around. He's just one of those guys.
Adult Lonnie Elam. That's not anything I ever needed to see. Or his lines are awful in that Halloween movie. He just doesn't help at all. He's just in the way. Like, bless him. I like his face, and I actually like what he brings to this. But I struggled to forgive him for Halloween Kills.
Yeah, I think the only weak link in the cast, it really, because the people that aren't good, that are just part of the Flanagan gang, they mostly don't have much to do or say, and they're just sort of lingering in the background. Right. But Bruce Greenwood, as the doctor that interviews him, he's just not good.
Oh, you don't think so?
No, I don't really buy it. I think he's too sort of swarthy and handsome to be a small town doctor in a hospice.
That's a good shout, actually. Yeah, he's quite Hollywood, isn't he?
Yeah. And then
that's actually quite a good point.
That also brings me to the Dr. Sleep stuff. Presumably that is much more of a thing in the book.
It's a bigger chapter in Danny's life, yeah.
Because like it's just sort of there. It's just like, oh, we put this here so we can call him Dr. Sleep.
Yeah, it's actually a huge and very dumb part of how Danny kills the True Knot. Do you want this ruined for you? Do you want to know?
Yeah, I do want it ruined for me because I'm never going to read it.
Okay, so the reason the True Knot are dying in the book is when they kill the baseball boy. You couldn't guess this in a million years.
Of course I could. It's Stephen King. He like exists on a fantastical, whimsical level that you could never guess because he's like, okay, what's the obvious thing? Okay, what's the next thing? And then 500 things later, he's like, what if Mr. Grey is an alien having a conversation with himself in an English accent? Like,
yeah, your logic is sound. And if I gave you long enough, I bet you can guess what happens. It's unbelievable. While they're killing the baseball boy, Grandpa Flick contracts measles from him.
Okay.
And dies as a result of the measles, which somehow in their thousands of years of existence they've never caught. Yeah.
But measles are the gunshot of diseases, right? So
yeah, exactly right. Gunshot to the head. So they need to get Abra because she presumably has been vaccinated against measles. So when they steam one off of her, they'll not only get the best steam hit of their lives, but they will also be cured of the measles. I'm so sorry. So using this in a kind of circular way, when Danny Torrance helps people die, they release in the book it's like a red mist, which is again just a weird choice because that connotes anger and anyway, and it ties in with the whole of The Shining is a kind of a meditation on anger and addiction. So I don't understand why he chose red mist. Anyway, the red mist escapes as they die, and as he's letting, I can't even remember how this happens. Some woman dies, and he decides to inhale her red mist and use it against the True Knot, and he releases it. And because she died of cancer, the red mist kills them all with cancer.
Oh.
It's real.
Yeah. This is why I won't read modern Stephen King.
I know, it's real bad. The worst thing is it's written really well. So you're like turning the pages going, oh yeah, okay, cancer. That's, oh, wow. Like you're reading it and really enjoying it. Then you put it down, you go away, or you try and explain it to someone. You're like, fucking hell, what am I doing with my life? I mean, that is awful, right? That is real bad stuff.
Yeah, no, it's Stephen King doesn't care about scrutiny. He just wants you to have a good time while you're doing it.
And therein lies the strength of this movie. If you can ditch all that King baggage, if you can just leave everything at the door and go into the movies and watch this film and enjoy how pretty it looks and how fun it is, you are having the time of your life for 3 hours, right?
I completely agree. And I also feel that the experience of watching this film is very similar to reading the Stephen King book or any Stephen King book in as much as it sounds like we're slagging this film off massively, but I had a great time watching it. It just doesn't really hold up to any level of scrutiny afterwards.
Yeah.
Once you start thinking about it, you're like, wait, did the ghosts in The Shining want to eat Danny's shine? Is that a thing in the book? I don't remember that at all.
There's no maze in The Shining, so where are all these boxes in Danny's mind? Like it's
the boxes in his mind are one of my least favorite things because that's a thing that works in a book. But when you start visualizing that it's the same in like Sherlock, the fucking Mind Palace or whatever, or in Dreamcatcher, there's a similar thing, which I guess, obviously Dreamcatcher is also Stephen King, so it's just him mining from himself there. But like, you can't visualize that. That's a thing that you picture in your head, a box. Okay, but now we're looking at his brain, it's full of box. I don't fucking know. It doesn't make any sense.
I think, controversially, it would work in an 80s Stephen King movie because you'd have like a cool reverse steam effect of the goblin going into the box. Like, that would be sick. Weirdly, I kind of like the boxes. It's a very heavy-handed compartmentalization metaphor, I guess, or allegory or whatever. And I did kind of like it. And I liked that they were filling the maze. I thought that was cool as fuck. So yeah, I guess slight difference of opinion there. I found that quite cool. I hated the... when he releases them and he goes, and they're starving. I thought, oh, get the fuck out of here. But again, another weird pivot from the book. When he opens all the boxes in the book, they all just kind of run away. They don't do anything. It's bizarre.
I just don't, why would they immediately be like, oh, you've released me from my eternal hunger, and now I'm going to eat that person and not you?
It is gibberish. It makes nil sense. I can't give that scene a pass. It's too illogical, even by Stephen King standards, to work. Yeah, it just sucks the life out of the movie at that point. But until then, we're on a pretty wild ride, and it's a good time all round. There's one scene in this movie that I thought was visually stunning. Have you got a similar thought or feeling about a single scene?
There was a shot that I loved more than anything else in the movie.
Go on.
Which was. It's such a little moment, and it's so weird, and it's done this way so we get a reveal of what's on the wall. But like, Dan is like writing on the chalkboard, and then the camera just sort of pans to the door, and then Dan walks into frame and leaves through the door, and then it whips back to the wall and it shows what he's written, which I can't remember what it was, but like I just thought that was such a cool. It reminded me, and this is insane, but there's a car chase or a driving scene. I can't remember if it's a car chase or a driving scene in To Live and Die in LA, where you're just sort of tracking this car as it drives, and then it like goes behind a bridge, and the tracking shot carries on, and then you just sort of meet the car at the top of the hill, and it turns a corner. And it just reminded me of that, and it just was like, this is cool, a cool way to draw you away from the thing that you're meant to be focusing on, to only to take you back to it in a cool way. And there are loads of really cool shots in this. There's a moment where, is it when they're eating the shine off someone, or the steam, and they're all lit by the RV lights, and they're all,
and it's kind of dusty.
Lots
of amber shades, and
I loved that stuff. That reminded me a bit of Goodfellas. That bit in Goodfellas where they're burying whichever character it is.
Yeah, there's so much eye candy in this movie, I guess.
Absolutely.
Everything looks cool as hell. And that's the benefit of a modern high budget movie, I guess. Everything's very smooth and slick, and the color work is amazing. There's something in the rhythm of the movie that you kind of touched on there with shots like that actually give you quite a lot of it's not fast. It's not a fast movie. It's not quickly cut. It's not leaping around and jump cuts and crazy scares and stuff. And there's something in shots like that that are kind of respectful of the material, I think, because it gives it loads of room to breathe.
Yeah.
And there's lots of really slow, kind of lolling, sleepy kind of cuts in this movie, and little passages of time that just feel imminently watchable.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very deliberate choice, I think, in the filmmaking, and a real change of pace from a lot of Stephen King movies. And it shows an understanding of the tone of the book, I think, which is really cool. And I hadn't really thought about that shot in that context, but there's a lot of very dreamy camera movements and a lot of stuff that feels like it's leading you through that maze a little bit, which is a real nice touch.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think I wrote down in the first half, like, this is amazing, and I think absolutely stands up to Kubrick. Like, it looks incredible, and it feels really mindful in a way that, like, obviously Kubrick was one of the most mindful directors out there.
Yeah.
And everything had a reason, and everything had a fucking manifesto behind it. Every little shot had an absolute huge thought process. And I was riding that, and then we got to the Overlook, or that shot as they're going to the Overlook, and it's the same shot, I'm pretty sure, from the original.
The drone shot.
Yeah, like the overhead.
Or like the helicopter, I guess. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's the exact same shot from the original.
Yeah, just with a slightly different landscape.
Yeah.
And again, like stuff like that, the music really helps. Having the score from The Shining at those key points is crucial, I think, to this movie's success. I'd be out of my mind to not know. You'd have to not really be watching to not notice the shot by shot.
Yeah.
When Ewan McGregor's going up the stairs backwards with the axe and Rose the Hat's pursuing him, it's a bit on the nose, but it's kind of cool.
Yeah, well, there's a moment in there that I knew was coming throughout the entire movie because I knew that we were going to the Overlook.
Yeah.
But when we see his mum in the beginning, and she's not Shelley Winters, I was like, this mum looks nothing like. I don't believe that she would ever let her cigarette ash get that long. So, like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, she's way too together. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, but when we see her in that shot, I don't know if they've just superimposed her face onto Shelley Winters or if they've like very carefully like mapped her movements. But it's the here's Johnny axe scene.
Yeah, yeah.
When we see her, the mum in that scene, I was like, okay, I buy it. I completely buy it in this moment.
I thought that was just the footage from the original. I thought it was just Shelley. Are you saying Shelley Winters? Shelley Duvall?
Shelley Duvall. Two names? Sorry.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I'm just saying
I thought that
just
name. Was her. I thought that was just footage lifted straight from the movie. Or at least it is in the director's cut. It's
definitely just her face. It's definitely the new actress's face.
Oh, okay. Right. Got you. Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, great stuff in there generally, just slightly rough to swallow because of, all of the reasons we've just discussed.
Yeah, like I said, I definitely think that the stuff in Ready Player One, which is, I think, a much, much worse movie than this.
Right.
But I think the Overlook stuff in Ready Player One is much better than this.
I quite like that movie and that book, weirdly. I found myself
I like the book better than the movie, but yeah.
And then I read one of his other books and I was like, fucking holy Jesus, this is trash.
More like Ernest Decline, am I right?
Oh my God. This guy. Yes, very much so. So, in terms of visuals, my favorite moment in the entire movie is Rose the Hat hovering above the clouds, vertical on your screen, and then swooping down into the window. But again, I can see you getting, you're going to fucking tear this to shreds. The only reason is, I think that resonates with people who have flying dreams, I think. And I've dreamt about flying in that exact way my whole life. And the perspective turning as I go through windows and stuff is exactly how I dream it. So clever, I think, because I think a lot of people dream about flying in that way. So it's clever to portray it that way, to relate to. And it's also quite a clever turning mechanism, I think, in terms of how the shot's composed. But you're looking at me like you hated it.
I didn't hate it. I just... There was a few moments that I wrote down were like modern horror visual traps, right?
Really?
And I think that's one of them. I think it just, and the white eyes was the other one. It was.
I love that shit. Oh wow. Okay, right. Here we go. Here's where we diverge. Finally.
I just sort of thought, okay, throughout the entire rest of the movie, we've been in a very sort of grounded, The Shining type place. Obviously, The Shining is a real place where there's fantastical stuff happening.
Yeah.
And then you start showing me fucking Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse shit.
Okay.
I'm just like, oh, like I get it, and it looks cool.
Yeah.
It just sort of looks like I'm watching a film from 2019 rather than watching a classic.
That's a very good point. Yeah, it's not going to hold up, is it? In 20 years, we're not going to be talking about that shot like we talk about the fucking blood coming out the elevator.
I was thinking about that concept all the way through. Like, what is a modern classic? Like, what films are we going to be talking about in 30, 40 years? Like we talk about The Shining.
Rough question. Not many.
Like,
not Dr. Sleep.
Almost. I mean, maybe, the brains in jars that are us will be talking about Dr. Sleep in 40 years because, like, we're talking about now. We're talking about films that nobody talked about in 1988.
True. Very true. Yeah.
So there will be people that are talking about Dr. Sleep, but there'll be shitty little podcast dickheads. Oh
God, imagine what oh my, I don't even want to think about it. The real horror story here is what the new generation will be like in 50 years time. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I totally understand. It's not a timeless or massively original scene, but I thought it served the movie really well because, again, it was very slow and it had that vampiric feeling to it that I thought was lacking. Like, these people are kind of soul vampires, and I wanted to see more of that. So the flash in the eyes works for me because it's like the steam going straight into their eyes, and it's a very old school effect. People have been doing that since the Warlock and shit like that.
The flash in their eyes is fine. It's the Dan Torrance, Abra, like white, no iris and pupil stuff that I didn't like.
See, I didn't find it scary, and I think it's supposed to be, you're supposed to really jump at that.
Yeah.
I didn't like it when they were standing together doing it. I thought that sucked ass. But I thought as a device, it was kind of cool. I think it was a break from everything else in the movie that was happening, so I kind of latched onto it. But the flying stuff for me, I thought was quite brave and just really quite mindfully shot. Like it felt like you were being transported through somebody else's mind into somebody else's mind, and it just felt the best of a million bad ways that you could do it. And I really enjoyed that sequence. It stuck with me when I saw it in the cinema, stuck with me on second and third watch, maybe because it brings a little bit of that kind of old school horror to the table. It looks a bit superimposed like an old Superman movie, and I had a lot of fun with it. The stuff that it leads to in each other's minds, I can kind of take or leave. That feels very young adult.
Yeah, also the stuff with where Rose the Hat gets her hand caught in the filing cabinet. Like,
that was all right because the gore was pretty solid.
Yeah, we saw that way better in Splinter.
True, yes. Anything with a hand being shredded in that manner, we saw, doing way better things in Splinter. But still, like, I found that kind of cool. I bought her panic. That's the only time I felt like she was an arrogant ancient evil being brought down a peg. I just didn't like that it was by a precocious child who's just like sassy and clicking her fingers and making all the magic happen. I just like, come on, like.
Yeah. I don't understand how there are any adults with Shine. Like, how has Danny Torrance stayed off this radar for so long? How did Halloran get to be what they refer to in Tropestown as the magical Negro? Like, how did he get to be that when there are these people out there eating Shine or Steam or Tony or whatever?
Eating Tony, the Shining Part 3. I mean, listen, I'm being really generous if I try and explain it by saying Halloran worked in an incredibly remote location for the majority of the year, and the rest of the time he was a fairly reclusive fella who lived alone and maybe kept his shine on the DL because he knew, I think, that there were ancient evils out there trying to suck steam out of his brains.
Surely, Rose the Hat and Crow Dave or whatever he's called are
Crow
like,
Daddy.
When the events of The Shining are happening, they should be absolutely hurtling towards the Overlook.
Yes, because the Overlook is like the epicenter of all shine and all evil.
Yeah.
Radiating this energy. Yeah. And again, in the book, it works because they can't pick up pick up on this shit from a million miles away. You know, Abra isn't sending out these like cosmic radio waves from hundreds of miles away. It's different. They have to be closer, and I think they read about something in the news, and they have people out in the world looking for kids with shine, etc. So for me, I think the reason they don't detect Danny is because he dulls his shine for his whole life and doesn't use it, just uses it to lock stuff away, and you know, he dampens it with all this booze, and in the book it's pills as well, and he's a full-on addict, which again we don't see enough of in the movie.
Yeah.
But again, it doesn't make sense. None of it makes any sense.
Yeah, I think the subtext of, you know, locking your demons away isn't really that healthy.
Yeah.
And like, obviously the Shining is about how you can be fully overtaken by alcoholism.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is probably in the most on the nose way about like how even if you think you've got in control of your alcoholism, you're gonna have to face it at some point in your life. And also like something that probably resonates with me and you is the fear that we're going to turn into our dads.
For sure.
Which
that's a huge part of Danny, right?
Yeah. I mean, and he absolutely does.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's why I wanted
literally
so much more.
in the book, at the end of the film, like he literally is shambling down the halls of the Overlook with an axe. It's I would say on the nose, on the gigantic honking schnoz, but like we've already subtly been fed that throughout the movie. He's an alcoholic. He's violent. He's lazy. Like he stands there in that AA meeting and gives the speech about how this is how he's fully got to understand his dad.
Yeah,
and it's
dedicates his chip to his dad.
Yeah, and then I don't necessarily need to see him be Jack Nicholson or whatever for that to happen.
It's probably the only example in the movie where talking about it is better than seeing it.
Yeah.
Whereas it's the other way around, I think, for the most part. Like, seeing it's fine, and then you talk about it and you're like, what the fuck?
Like, I kind of liked the idea that his dad is trapped in the Overlook and is now the barman that Delbert O'Grady was, or whatever it's called, when
Lloyd.
they were... Yeah. So he's now Lloyd. And that's a cool idea. I mean, he looks terrible. He looks like... Do you know, like the dust jacket version of Jack Nicholson, where they don't really have the rights to make him look like he's actually Jack Nicholson?
Yeah, the person's painted him based on a description, not actually seeing the
Yeah,
movie.
exactly.
Yeah. He looks worse than the guys that you see on the, you know, the Hollywood Walk of Fame, whatever the fuck it is. He looks worse than the impersonators that you see out there. Some really fucking impressive Jack Nicholson lookalikes out there.
Yeah.
It's a real shame they went with that guy and he couldn't pull off the mannerisms, really, I don't think.
No, he doesn't nail it at all for me. He sort of feels like we're trying to mash up the Jack Torrance from a book and from the film.
Yeah.
It doesn't really work. So I sort of really quite liked the TV miniseries of The Shining.
Right.
With Stephen, whatever his name is, as
much closer to the book, right?
Yeah. It's bad because of that. Because the book, I mean, it's good when you read it, but fucking living topiaries embodied with the spirits of.
There's not a lot about the book that I like, to be honest. It's not even in my top 5 Stephen King books.
No, I mean it's good when you read it. I think it holds up to more scrutiny than Under the Dome or whatever. But
I'd put Under the Dome above The Shining. I think that's probably Kingian sacrilege. I think I'm probably going to get fucked up for that. Someone's going to beat me up in an alley. No, I totally agree. The relationship between Danny and his father is rich, fertile ground for a movie, I think, and either reconciliation or total rejection of who his dad is. The scene where he's actually talking to his dad in the Overlook had so much potential, and it is actually it's Ewan McGregor being quite vulnerable, I think, and delivering a pretty solid chunk of dialogue uninterrupted by action, which is usually where he completely falls apart for me. And the slapping away of the whiskey, the conveying the depths of abuse that his dad was capable of in life, I think is pretty great. The real enemy and the real terror being the substances that take hold of his dad and ultimately ruin the entire family's life. Fascinating, really, really interesting relationship. Again, just not really plumbed enough for me.
No, I also don't think they sell that historic ongoing abuse in the original movie of The Shining.
No, it's one of King's big bugbears with the movie is that you don't see Jack's struggle enough. In the book, it's a bit more sympathetic, right? Well, it's not, I don't know. You see his slow slip into madness and you see him become more reliant on the booze and more abusive. And it's a very clear line between the amount that he drinks and the amount of abuse he dishes out.
Yeah. And like we don't see any of the stuff that happens before they go to the Overlook where you know, he breaks down his arm and all that stuff. Like it's sort of implied, but it's never really plumbed properly, I think.
No.
So there's some weird baggage that I think presumably the book doesn't sequelize any of the stuff that happens in the movie like the way the movie sequelizes The Shining.
No, the book is a pretty staunch rejection of the movie. Even to the point of obviously like almost kind of as a statement showing you that Halloran is alive. It serves no real purpose. It's just like, fuck you, he's here, and the Overlook is gone. So, yeah, it doesn't pay any lip service to the movie whatsoever. It doesn't acknowledge its existence.
Yeah, I also think like the other people in the Overlook sort of suck in Doctor Sleep. Like the Great Party, isn't it, guy? He's not
American accent.
He's not even nearly as terrifying as a guy enjoying a party in the 80s. Like, why is that so much scarier?
It's really clumsy the way they just drop him in there as almost like a jump scare and as a bit of fan service. They shoot him from too far away. There's just loads wrong with that moment and that character. Yeah, just all wrong, unfortunately. All of the whatever you call it, like the throwback or pullback stuff to the original movie characters, the little girls, the elevator, all of that, unfortunately, junk.
Yeah, it's the brawl in the bathtub is the only one that works, I think.
Yeah, but I think they knew it worked and they overused it. It just stopped being menacing. It was great in the flashback. I love the idea of that ghost following Danny because in the book they moved to Florida at the end of The Shining. I don't know if that's what's happening in the movie. I can't remember, but
they do mention that in the movie because they didn't want to see snow. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, right, yeah. So being in dude, that's harrowing. Like the torment that Danny goes through in his life, you really want to see pay off with a full-on derelict adulthood.
Yeah.
In the book, there's a really, really beautifully written Stephen King classic where Danny is sleeping under a bridge and it's so punishingly down and out and it feels like some serious lived experience on King's part. I love when he's writing about addiction. I really, really enjoy it. It's such a pulpy, gritty, but very real and beautifully rendered depiction of lived addiction. And we get some of that in Danny, but he pulls back from it in a way that I wasn't expecting here and there.
How does it feel for you to know that somewhere in those boxes in his brain is a guy in a bear suit sucking off a guy?
Great. I bet that's the box that he has a little peek in every now and then. I would. I'd be like, fuck, what was that all about? Let's go have a little look.
He opens the box and the bear just looks at him again like,
I'm starving.
Will you give it up, man? Nobody's out there. We're alone. Oh no, there's somebody out there. I'm picking up all this crosstalk.
I mean, what a bizarre universe we're inhabiting where we have... What the fuck was Kubrick doing directing this ever at all, even to begin with? We're really lucky to have that movie, even if it does dump all over the original. But then for it to be sequelized by Flanagan, it's a bizarre thing to exist. And I think that's why it feels like a real treat, because it's silly enough to be really entertaining. It's scary enough to be a horror movie. It's fun enough to be a great watch in the cinema, and it has just enough meat on the bones to hold up to, you know, a modicum of scrutiny. So you walk away ultimately satisfied. Satisfies me. You walk away satisfied, but in the weirdest possible way. Like you've just eaten the shittiest junk food snack imaginable. Like you've just eaten a cold hot dog with your bare hands.
I think that's maybe a little bit of a disservice. I think it's like a burger, but there's foie gras on the burger.
Oh, good grief.
So like it's
Is it that guilty a pleasure?
Not. I've never eaten foie gras, so I don't know. I do know that I like it, but I've never eaten it.
Okay. That's weird because I know I don't like it and I've never eaten it.
I was talking about this the other day. Like nothing that is that cruel that has endured forever Like, it has to be the most delicious thing in the world. There's no reason for something that cruel to be still done now.
In many ways, Steam is the foie gras of the Stephen King universe.
Absolutely, yeah. But yeah, I think like it's, I don't know, an IKEA hot dog but with foie gras on it. Like
Jesus. Okay.
It's popcorn trash, but with just enough really good stuff to get you where you need to be. And I think I really, really, really enjoyed it watching it. And I was expecting not much at all.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would probably give this, it's tricky,
a pass.
Isn't it? Yeah, definitely a pass. I think.
Let's try and make it easy for you. Would you give it a second watch?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd watch it again. I would maybe go back and watch the director's cut at some point in the future.
Yeah. Would you do a little bit more digging into the movie itself? Like, would you watch featurettes about the making of, or like interviews with Ewan McGregor, etc.? Would you be that interested?
I think the most interesting thing about the Overlook stuff would be watching a featurette on how they recreated the Overlook.
Yeah, that would be sick.
I would absolutely watch that, and that would be much more interesting, I think, than the actual Overlook stuff that we get in the movie.
Yeah. Of all the characters, I can't believe they cut Bent Dick out of this movie.
I'm glad that they renamed Barry the Chunk from what I presume his name is in the book, knowing Stephen King.
I can't remember what his name is. There's so many bad names in it. Honestly, there's someone called like, what the fuck, like Steamhead Steve or something. Like it's that bad. It's like
Steamhead Steve is that guy that was doing the festival circuit a few years ago, right? Where he would stomp on a box and
the
sing
three-string trance wonder. Yeah. I tell you what, we'll do a quick better or worse Dr. Sleep in terms of Stephen King movie adaptations. That will help you place it, I think.
Okay.
Dr. Sleep, It Chapter 2.
Are we talking Andy Muschietti like recently? Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Sleep.
Okay, Dr. Sleep, The Mist.
Well, that's tricky.
That's really tricky.
I've come around on The Mist quite a lot in the last 10 years or so. I used to hate it.
Yep.
But I would probably say The Mist.
Ooh, because I know you was a Mist hater. So what's brought you around on The Mist? A little bit of Thomas Jane love?
Yeah, I think I was always, spoiler for The Mist, but I was always like really down on the ending of The Mist.
Really? I thought you would have fucking loved that ending.
Like, it just sort of didn't feel earned to me.
Okay.
In the novella, like, I think everything is cool, but like in the ending of the movie, I don't feel like we're quite at the desperation point of shooting our child in the face.
Right, okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Completely valid point. Yeah.
So
right.
I never really glommed onto that and was able to accept it. But now I've just sort of got over it, and I quite like the idea of Thomas Jane shooting his child in the face.
Oh, me too.
As
Love
the
it.
army come around the corner.
Yeah. Okay, so The Mist above Dr. Sleep. Fair enough. Salem's Lot, Dr. Sleep.
I mean, I love Salem's Lot. It's maybe my favorite second tier Stephen King adaptation.
I thought it might be, yeah.
So I'm saying Salem's Lot.
Okay, so we're placing it quite well here. We won't go into non-horror territory. I think that's unfair.
Okay.
What about
Dreamcatcher? Dreamcatcher wins.
Dreamcatcher, yeah. I've got a real soft spot for Dreamcatcher.
I love Dreamcatcher. I think it's
complete madness, right?
Yeah. I think you give me Morgan Freeman saying shit weasels, and I am completely sold on that movie forever.
So Stephen King to pick up on just a dumb phrase and do it over and over and over. Good grief.
Yeah.
All right.
Like that scene, like I mentioned before, of Damian Lewis when he's both himself and Mr. Grey having a conversation with himself on a fucking skidoo or whatever. It's just
pretty incredible acting, right?
Yeah, it's peak cinema for me. I love Dreamcatcher. There's a moment in that I find really beautiful where the car sort of careens over a berm and they just cut all the sound out while they're like floating through the air. It's fucking great movie. Cool. I love it. Terrible.
I bet nobody in that movie ever thought they would do anything that happens in that movie when they started acting. They're like doing fucking Othello and shit. a billion miles away from the madcap nonsense of Dreamcatcher.
Let's be honest, Jason Lee started in Mallrats, so
It's a very, very good point. Open
He's-
to all
he-
comers.
yeah, he is lucky to be in a film as literary
Yeah.
as Dreamcatcher.
That's literary. Woof. Fuck, I hope Stephen King just isn't sensing how much we're bashing him right now because I'm such a huge fan.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
we love Stephen King. The only thing that we hate about Stephen King is podcasts that are dedicated to him, right?
Yeah, damn straight. Who needs to fucking chow down on Stephen King that much? Build a fucking mansion out of the guy. Let's give Dr. Sleep some easy wins. Children of the Corn versus Dr. Sleep.
That's not an easy win, Sam.
Oh, come on. Give me a break.
Like Children of the Corn sequels, sure, but I would maybe put it on a par.
Wow. Okay, we got a draw. Okay, there'll have to be a tiebreaker later on, I think.
I think it's hard because I saw Children of the Corn when I was 13.
When you were a child of the corn.
Yeah. So, the whole Lord of the Flies, like
Yeah.
children run society, that really hits me right in my, special place.
God, that is a movie, not a single moment of which I enjoyed. It's so bad. Okay, all right. I would think that this would be a difficult one, but The Dead Zone versus Dr. Sleep.
I don't love the movie of The Dead Zone.
Hmm.
I love that book,
Yeah.
but I don't. And I love Christopher Walken.
Are you about to pick Ewan McGregor over Christopher Walken in some universe? That's the decision you're making here.
Yeah, no, I think Doctor Sleep is better than The Dead Zone.
Fantastic. Now we're getting some contentious bullshit going here. What are you going to say if I give you It Part 1 versus Dr. Sleep?
I'm going to say it part 1.
Okay. What about Misery versus Dr. Sleep? Surely that's
Misery
open
all
shut.
day, every day.
Have you seen Mr. Harrigan's Phone?
No.
Okay.
Is it around here
Surprisingly-
somewhere?
It's surprisingly watchable. It's based on a very modern King short story that's basically an iPhone ad, which is a real rough hang. Needful Things versus Dr. Sleep.
So I think Needful Things is one of those quite faithful adaptations in as much as it just sort of goes all over the place and ends up somewhere pretty fucking dumb,
Yeah.
which is, the absolute epitome of Stephen King.
Yeah.
So I would, that might be a draw. Needful Things might just edge it because Max von Sydow is great in it.
Yeah. All right. Well, here's a real tricky one.
Pet
Have you seen
Sematary.
Cell?
Okay. I haven't seen Cell with Jennifer Lopez. Is that-
It's Samuel L. Jackson and John Cusack.
Oh, fuck. Yeah, no, I've not seen that.
Okay, skip that then. Carrie versus Dr. Sleep.
Controversial, Sam.
Go on.
I don't love Carrie.
Yep.
I think
Here
a
it
lot
comes.
of the movie is quite challenging and not in a way that engages me. This is me
Right.
trying not to say that it's boring.
Well, it's of its time, shall we say.
Yeah, so I would pick Dr. Sleep over Carrie.
Okay. This is going to be a real stinger. Are we going to cut all this out, by the way?
I mean, maybe. We might.
It's something for people to disagree with. Secret Window versus Dr. Sleep. Johnny Depp versus Ewan McGregor.
I mean, I don't love Johnny Depp, but I do
Okay.
like Secret Window quite a lot.
Right, okay.
So I would probably go Secret Window.
All right. And the final one, before we get into real silly goose territory, I'm not going to do anymore. The Running Man versus Dr. Sleep.
The Running Man. It's a perfect movie.
It fucking sucks. Have you watched it
No.
recently?
Yeah, I have. Me and Kaz watched it maybe 6 months ago.
Fucking bored me to tears as an adult. I loved it as a kid, but I couldn't watch that shit as a grown ass man. It
We're on
fucking
a bit of a
drags.
a bit of a Schwarzenegger kick
Oh, nice.
over the last year or so. So I've been sort of going back and showing Kaz all the Schwarzenegger movies that she maybe hasn't seen. So we watched
Nice.
Total Recall, we watched The Running Man, and she'd seen Last Action Hero. And I think I made her watch it quite early on because I love Last Action Hero and
Yeah, it's a great movie.
Predator. She'd never seen Predator.
Oh, wow.
I
I love
was
a
like-
good Schwarzenegger kick. That's great fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We watched Conan. She didn't care for Conan too much.
Really?
Yeah,
Love a
I
bit
love
of Conan.
it. Yeah, but
There's a Stephen King movie that I've never seen that has always been right on the edge of. I just haven't grabbed it. Like I can see it on VHS in the video shop. I can see it on all the streamers. I can see it everywhere, but I've never gone for it. Cat's Eye. Have you seen Cat's Eye?
Yeah, Cat's Eye's amazing.
Is it good?
Yeah.
All right, that's going on my list.
It's sorry. Let me rephrase that. Yeah.
You can you can cut out the bit where you said it was amazing if you want.
Like, yeah, more like that than yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, I'll check out Cat's Eye, and I'll rate it against Doctor Sleep. So it sounds to me like you rate this kind of mid tier, obviously behind the heavy hitters and behind the things that just tickle your particular taste a little bit more intensely, but it sounds like you don't despise this movie. It's relatively mid-tier King, which
if I was
lower tier general horror movie.
If I was to put this on a completely arbitrary scale of King,
yeah.
If there was, number 1 is Pet Sematary, number 10 is fucking Riding the Bullet, like
Maximum Overdrive.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of love Maximum Overdrive.
I knew you would. That's the biggest trap I've ever laid in Final Transmission history, was to slag off Maximum Overdrive.
Come on now.
Have you defend it.
It's amazing.
Okay.
What was I saying? Oh, yeah. So 10 is, Riding the Bullet or the Langoliers, which, I kind of have a soft spot for, but it's objectively terrible.
It was my first ever movie scare. I watched that when I was way too young with my grandparents.
Was it just seeing fucking Dean Stockwell's face?
I mean, a lot of it, yeah. I mean, really, really harrowing for a kid. I had nightmares about it for literally years. When people ask you the question, like, what was the first scary movie that ever really scared you? For me, it's the fucking Langoliers.
Is it because you're so terrified of Sky Pac-Man that you...
Yes. Nothing scares me more than the Sky and Pac-Man. So when the two meet... I'm in bits.
Yeah. I just thought it was bad. But yeah, I'd put this around a 4 or a 5, I think. I think this is like upper tier adaptation stuff.
Yeah.
Like good movie. Good movie.
Good movie.
Yeah.
I tell you what I love that this movie does, and this is how low the bar is. It is not, repeat, it is not Pet Sematary 2, which is, to this day, I mean, actually, no, that's wrong, sorry. Pet Sematary 2 is an entirely different sack of bullshit. I mean the Pet Sematary remake. My apologies. It is not the Pet Sematary remake, which is one of the only movies I've ever walked out of. That is an unforgivable tainting of both the original material and the cinematic legacy of a King property. There is nothing good about that movie. And this was in serious danger of becoming that just by virtue of being a modern Hollywood remake of a modern Hollywood movie adaptation of a King novel.
Yeah.
So the fact that it doesn't fall into any of those traps is just music to my ears.
I think it's one saving grace, and it's tricky because it does link so heavily to The Shining, which is, a classic.
Yeah.
Is that the Pet Sematary had all of that baggage of how great the original Pet Sematary was, and how some of the performances or whatever, but that Fred Gwynne performance, you absolutely cannot fault it. It is, I think Fred Gwynne in that role came directly out of Stephen King's brain.
Definitely.
If Stephen King was I really want this character to be fucking Herman Munster, but really chopsy. Who knew that Herman Munster had that in him? Or
it's if there's such a thing as perfect casting, it just is. Sometimes it's really easy to imagine somebody else in a role, and sometimes that person just is that role. I think Fred Gwynne, I don't dislike anything I've ever seen Fred Gwynne do on a screen, to be completely honest. Maybe a little bit Marmite, but somebody who I find really comforting to watch on screen. And him as Judd is just, it's just too perfect. He just is him. So listen, we've left the Overlook smoldering behind us. We've had time to digest what I hope is the resolution of the Shining corner of the Stephen King universe. Do you have any final thoughts, any big takeaways from this movie, or both movies, or whatever you want to say about this?
Well, I think it's interesting to revisit that alcoholism addiction storyline in a much more nuanced capacity, which we don't get in the original Shining movie. Obviously, the novel is a lot more nuanced in its take on alcoholism and addiction. And presumably, like you said, the Dr. Sleep novel is a bit more nuanced in its take on alcohol and addiction. But like the idea that we are challenging the recovery of, you know, a character that is being so, or spent so long sort of drowning in addiction, and then moves into recovery, and then we're challenging that, and the sort of the looking at the generational trauma and how, you know, like I say, we are all ultimately terrified that we'll eventually turn into our dads. I think that's a really interesting like starting point for writing a book or a movie, and I think it's much cooler than, you know, oh, I wonder what happened to Danny from the Shining. Like I think it's a much more interesting place to take that and to develop that from, and it absolutely makes sense for the character, because, you know, going through those events of The Shining and then having to continue living afterwards, it's a whole fucked up thing. So
yeah,
I think it's a cool idea. I think it's a cool starting point for a thing. I think it's executed in the movie. Like I say, I haven't read the book, really, really well. I would love to have seen, as we said, much, much more Danny down and out stuff.
Yeah.
Which I guess is kind of depressing, but it's much more interesting to me. I want to watch, you know, Danny Torrance in Leaving Las Vegas. Like
Danny's fucked up years.
Yeah, like that's the interesting thing to me. And like they gloss over a lot of stuff that I think should be more important, and you mentioned is more important in the book, like the death of the woman and the baby. But ultimately, it's a really enjoyable experience, and like it feels like it means something, and it feels meaty while you're watching it. Obviously, it's caked in dumb Stephen King bullshit.
Yeah.
But in a way that, like you said at the very beginning, it just feels very charming.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the magic of Stephen King, is that he can say, you know, what if, right? What if? Now,
I'm listening.
Go with me on this. What if a ancient energy vampire wore a hat?
It can't be done, Steve.
I would give this movie 4 dick hollerings out of 6.
Dick hollerings. 4 out of 6. Pretty good for a King adaptation.
Absolutely.
That's pretty great. Yeah, I agree with you on all points. It's difficult to adapt Stephen King. We've seen this, you know, time and time again. We've seen exactly the same thing happen. Some huge victories, some massive losses, and combinations of all of the above in lots of different movies. I think what this does well is have a budget, have some genuinely good actors, have a consistent look, tone, feel, pace, and sense of its place in the King universe. It's pretty loyal and quite tenderly attached to the original material, which I think is great. It dances a fine line between being the sequel to a detested adaptation that Stephen King himself has completely disowned any connection to, and being a kind of an independent take on both in a weird way. So it does a really hard job quite well. I think we skimmed over Billy Freeman's suicide scene, which doesn't happen in the book. A similar thing happens. Somebody else, Danny, actually makes someone blow their brains out. But in the movie, that's done really, really well. It goes to really dark places pretty unflinchingly, which I'm really impressed with, especially Baseball Boy.
The thing with Billy Freeman is that if Danny's shine power is so strong, why doesn't he just stop him?
Yeah, exactly. And that's dealt with more effectively in the book.
Because like there's it feels like there's an hour between Snakebite Andy saying kill yourself and Billy Freeman actually doing it.
I mean, he could have stopped him physically in that time, like
literally.
Yeah, and he also doesn't grieve it. You don't see Danny struggle with that at all at any point, which blows.
I feel like I wouldn't kill myself immediately and be like, well, she didn't say do it now. I'll just do it in 10 years.
Yeah, right. But her like cackling as she dissolves on the floor. The effects in this movie are, from where I'm sitting, pretty cool. There's a lot here that entertains me specifically. I can see why a lot of more diehard King fans would hate it. I can see why a lot of moviegoers would just be mystified by what the hell's going on. So it occupies a strange little hinterland for me in the King catalogue that I'm fairly fond of. I really enjoy the performances, and I'm astonished to say that I can't really fault Ewan McGregor in this movie.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I think he actually performs with quite a lot of love for the material. He read the books. He's obviously a fan, and he does a pretty bloody good job. So hats off to Ewan McGregor. Top hats off to Ewan McGregor. Overall, I enjoyed watching this movie every time I watched it. I was surprised at how the original Shining movie feels incredibly long and is actually quite short, and this feels really short despite being incredibly long. So they both work quite well together. I'm going to give it 4 little goblin boxes in my mind out of 7. It's not quite everything I want it to be, but it's still a pretty entertaining movie. It's a great Sunday afternoon movie. Slap it on, kick back, have a laugh, scratch your head, and enjoy the visuals. It's a good time. I'm just kind of grateful this movie exists and isn't terrible because of all the things we've said already about adaptations.
Agreed. We went pretty hard on this movie, and I think it's because we liked it, but because it's really modern.
Yeah, and it's easy to take the piss out of something that's ultimately very silly, but actually quite brave, dare I say. Making this into a movie is hard, and I've got an enormous amount of respect for the way they pulled it off. So, and also taking the piss out of stuff it's kind of our love language. So if we like something, of course we're going to fucking shred it on the podcast.
This feels like our most negative review yet
of one of our favorite movies.
Of a movie that came out in the last 5 years that I have genuinely really enjoyed.
Yep, but that is Stephen King. Sit me down and get me talking about any of the Stephen King books that I genuinely love, and I'll slag them off for an hour before I say how great they are. It's just such a mixed experience enjoying his writing.
Yeah, I think last thought from me is that I was worried when I saw that this was Mike Flanagan, or maybe not. Because I maybe didn't have the Flanagan baggage at that point. But thinking about when I was going to watch it this time, Mike Flanagan adapted The Haunting of Hill House and The Haunting of Bly Manor, and then the entire sort of Poe back catalogue in The Fall of the House of Usher. And those are very nice sort of spiritual adaptations, but they don't, they're not faithful to the book in a way that is interesting. Specifically not Fall of the House of Usher, because that sort of weaves all of those stories, sort of like Castle Rock, the TV show, did with Stephen King stuff, into one cohesive universe.
Yeah.
And so I was sort of worried that we were going to get that sort of Mike Flanagan, that flavor Flanagan. But we didn't. So, fair dues.
Dodged a bullet. This movie has a lot of feelings of dodging bullets, which is kind of cathartic and euphoric, which is maybe why we're fairly generous and excited about it, is because you do feel great when something isn't shit, almost more so than when something is good. I mean, he did a solid job, I thought, of a fairly faithful retelling of Gerald's Game with...
I did like Gerald's Game with, Bruce Greenwood.
Yep. Bruce Greenwood kicking its ass as a dead guy.
Yeah.
How do you say the name of the Twin Peaks giant? Carol Stryken?
I think is it Stryken?
Stryken. He's in it, and so is Henry Thomas. So, like you said, the Flanagan in full force. So, yeah, not doing King for the first time and not doing it badly is pretty high praise.
Yeah, definitely. Fair dues to you, Mike Flanagan. We salute you, sort of.
We salute you. Shawing. Speaking of which, if you want to support Final Transmission, the best thing you can do is write a quick review and give a 5-star rating to this episode, because we know you've enjoyed it. Tell all your friends.
Absolutely.
Follow us on Instagram, follow us on TikTok. Enjoy all of our juicy content.
Yeah, if you're not following or subscribed to wherever you are listening to this, then make sure you do that too, just so then all episodes will be delivered directly to your handheld device.
Do that.
Your BlackBerry, your Nokia N95.
Or if you're listening in the future, the chip in your brain.
Chip in the brain sounds tasty.
It does. Do you think we'll ever be able to listen to podcasts through butt plugs? If so, I'm in.
Yeah. Plug us directly into your butt. The Final Transmission podcast.
A plug and play experience for the ages.